Ahora sí. Hola, ¿cómo está? Buenas tardes.
Hola,
¿Me
buenos
escucha?
días.
Hola,
Sí, escucho. Buenos días, buenas tardes, Carolina Ramón.
¿cómo está? ¿Cómo está? ¿Cómo está? Muy bien.
Sí, estamos listos para presentar en inglés
Estamos,
sobre un
estamos,
tema tan importante que ha estado mucho en las noticias estas últimas 4 semanas, el asunto de la geoingeniería.
claro que sí. Vamos a comenzar entonces un poquito en español y ahí lo demás todo en inglés, así como ya lo habíamos conversado. Por favor, cuénteme un poco de su experiencia en cuanto al tema, un poco de introducción en español y todo lo demás, los 30 minutos en inglés, por favor. Adelante.
Claro, bueno, como periodista y como activista es uno de los temas más importantes, es el asunto de la modificación del clima, la geoingeniería, y lo que hay es geoingeniería o modificación climática que está abierta y modificación que está encubierta. Y ahora hay muchos planes en marcha para la geoingeniería abierta, o sea, que dicen directamente que van a hacerlo. Lo que no dicen es que hace mucho tiempo ya comenzaron a hacer la geoingeniería, la fumigación clandestina aérea, que tenemos pruebas de eso por muchas diferentes maneras, y más que todo la observación y es grave, significa una guerra contra el pueblo de Estados Unidos, de Canadá, en Europa también. Yo sé que hay activistas en España que están muy activos alrededor de este tema. Y es guerra química, guerra biológica contra el pueblo. Tiene que ver con armas del clima. Tiene que ver mucho como ahora, especialmente con los líderes de Latinoamérica de la izquierda nacionalista como Petros, en Colombia, ciertamente Rafael Correa también cuando fue presidente. Hay la idea de buscar alternativas de la autoridad de Washington, pero corren a las instituciones internacionales como Foro Económico Mundial, como Naciones Unidas, como Organización Mundial de la Salud, sin dar cuenta que estas instituciones representan una jerarquía nueva, que claro no es lo mismo como el imperialismo del siglo XX, pero representa igual una tiranía. Y hay poco energía en Latinoamérica para cuestionar las macro narraciones, especialmente cuando trata del calentamiento global o cosas de la salud. Y creo que los que de nosotros que estamos, que tenemos una formación en los artes liberales, debemos cuestionar nuestros propios prejuicios y no tratar la ciencia como si es algo establecido, pero siempre preguntado. Y justamente con la administración de Trump en Estados Unidos, tenemos están echando un vistazo nuevo sobre este tema de la geoingeniería, tal la geoingeniería abierta y la geoingeniería encubierta. Entonces, no sé si en el futuro vamos a ver guerra civil dentro de la administración de Trump, pero por ejemplo, Robert Kennedy Jr., que es jefe encargado del Departamento de la Salud, que es una rama de la Casa Blanca, él está investigando el asunto de las nubes artificiales y la Agencia de Protección Medioambiental bajo Donald Trump también ha abierto una investigación en empresas de geoingeniería, específicamente uno que se llama Make Sunsets, en español, hacer los atardeceres. Es su nombre y rodean nubes artificiales y durante Biden le dio un permiso para 200 años de modificación climática. Con Trump ahora lo terminó. Entonces, mi recomendación es que informamos sobre este tema, vean las fotos de las nubes artificiales, lean los documentos, porque es algo que afecta a nosotros, también como las macro narraciones sobre calentamiento global, que es más humos especos. ¿Comienzo en inglés?
Sí, sí, acá son las 4:41, entonces vamos a comenzar con este tema muy importante, ahora sí en su idioma natal. Adelante, por favor.
Yeah, so the title of my talk is Geoengineering and Weather Modification, Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars and the Battle for Our Skies. Thank you, Carolina Ramon, for this opportunity to come and talk. Thank you for the Colegio de los Abogados, and thank you, Geneva Academy and Holly, for making this possible. My name is Patrick Phillips. I'm an activist and journalist. I've been involved in political activism for most of my adult life. And the situation in the United States is grave, as it is in Canada, as it is in Europe, where the overhead spraying, the clandestine aerial fumigation is in full swing. It's having a catastrophic effect on nature, represents a type of biological and chemical warfare against the populations of these countries. And, you know, I grew up in the shadow of the Cold War when the threat was from nuclear radiation. And that was a threat that we all were pretty much aware of. But the threat that's coming from the smart dust, the nanoparticles that are in the fake clouds, that's not something that humanity has really considered the risk. And I'd like to read a quote by Ethan Indigo Smith in his article, Geoengineering and the Nuclear Connection. He notes that the complexity of nuclear experimentation is beyond postmodern human comprehension. It reveals our collective inability to consider the invisible, whether ethereal substances or toxic nanoparticles. We simply don't see them. And this applies equally to aerial spraying and atmospheric ionization. Unlike nuclear radiation, which can take thousands of years to disappear, nanometals never decompose. They started the spraying in the 90s, in the mid-90s, and the Earth cannot take much more decades of this. RFK Jr., who is in head of the Department of Health and Human Services for the Trump administration, is investigating this, but he is only one branch. But God bless him, you know, if you were in the United States 4 months ago 4 weeks ago, it's appropriate that we're doing this talk on the last day of April in 2025, because every week this month there has been news about geoengineering. Starting 4 weeks ago, when if you had been in Florida, you would have seen people with signs and banners that said, "Make the sky blue again." What it was Florida was considering a law banning geoengineering in the state of Florida. Other states have passed similar legislation. Other states are having the legislation proceed through the House and Senate to ban geoengineering, and that legislation in Florida passed. What are they talking about? Make the skies blue again. Let me give some background about geoengineering. 2 years ago, the BBC website ran an article where they described a scenario in India where climate change has so devastated the land that there's famine, couldn't grow the crops. And so India took it upon themselves to send hundreds of airplanes up to spray chemicals to block the sun. And they said the rain returned, the people were able to eat, the crops came back. But the way that the BBC presented this was, okay, this is a fictional scenario, it's taken from the novel, but in the short future, this could become the reality. And it's anti-democratic because nations, they used emergency to take these kind of unitary actions. Well, that countdown to insanity is actually here, because within a few days, England has announced they're going to be doing these full-on geoengineering experiments to block the sun. And this shouldn't surprise us, because in all the science magazines, all the mainstream newspapers over the last, really since starting about 2017, have been running stories saying that geoengineering is a quick fix to climate change, a technological solution to the question of global warming, blocking out the sun. David Keith of the Keith Group in Canada, he's also a very vocal proponent of this. What is geoengineering? Okay, let's back up. Most people, when they think of geoengineering, they think of cloud seeding in Dubai. While that undoubtedly is geoengineering, I propose that it's actually something larger. Geoengineering means large-scale manipulation of Earth's climate systems, usually to combat climate change, but it's sold as theoretical, while in reality, aspects of it are already operational. So this company that the Trump Environmental Protection Agency has recently started to investigate, Make Sunsets, that's the name, you can't make this stuff up. They had a 200-year agreement with the United States government through Biden to be able to modify the climate over the United States. They're banned in Mexico. And if you go to their website and read all about their proposals, they have these computerized images. It's fake images, but it's from a company that really is doing geomodification. And it tells you the proposals that, and Biden gave them a 200-year lease on the Earth. They use hot air balloons, they release sulfur, and on their website they brag about how their clouds are semi-permanent for 5 or 6 years. Why it's important is because it shows how the alarm of climate change has made it so people that even self-identify as environmentalists are willing to become polluters. In fact, that's why they came on the radar of Trump's EPA. When this metal dust is in the sky, they can then hit it with frequencies, and that's why it makes these geometric patterns that never exist in nature. These are pulses. To have that kind of cloud formation in nature would be like putting monkeys in the desert with a typewriter and then expecting them to type Shakespeare. Then they have these microwave transmitters that they use. Most of the time, this is our reality now in the United States. These are the fake clouds. So I just want to keep giving some background, talking about the interplay between overt geoengineering and covert geoengineering, and how there's a feedback between them and how one's used to justify the other. Geoengineering needs to be framed as an environmental issue, not a science one. That we don't need more debate about what's happening. We need political solutions. Now, the United States has a history of using weather weapons. At the end of World War II, they had developed a tidal wave bomb, a bomb that can make tidal waves. Even before that, the U.S. Air Force had developed smoke screens to be able to drop fake clouds and use smoke screens to cover ships. Everybody's heard about Operation Popeye in Vietnam, where the U.S. military flooded the Ho Chi Minh Trail, extended the monsoon season. And after that, in 1978, the UN Environmental Modification Convention banned weather modification as an instrument of war, but they left the caveat that governments could do it on their own people because you can't really regulate that. So key question to the audience, and if you're not watching live, if you watch this afterwards, you can leave what you think in the comment section. Is geoengineering just a future idea, or is it already happening above our heads? A related question is, does the sky belong to everyone or to a handful of corporations and governments? Think about that. And another interesting question is, how does geoengineering and weather warfare intersect? And in the 60s, the United States was very open about wanting to modify the climate. In fact, President Lyndon Johnson said famously on video that they were working on the creation of a weather satellite that would control the cloud layer of the Earth. And he said, and whoever controls the weather controls the world. Fast forward to 1995, we have the U.S. Air Force document, Owning the Weather. 1996, I think it was, they released it. It's like Owning the Weather in 2025, weather as a force multiplier. And there's a 3-year plan, and we're in 2025 right now, the year that the military said they wanted to own the weather. So with the UN modification, or the UN banning weather modification with this treaty, how did we get to where we are today, where there are patents for weather manipulation everywhere, and there's proposals everywhere? Some of the proposals involve ships spraying fake clouds in the sky, but all the proposals center around airplanes spraying chemicals from the backs of airplanes. So how come it's not crazy to suggest all these proposals of airplanes doing spraying, but anybody who wants to add into the equation that geoengineering might already be going on, that's out of bounds. So it's not crazy for the BBC and for the New York Times and Smithsonian, National Geographic, and The Guardian to write all these pro-geoengineering articles. Up until now, England is getting ready to launch them, and they have launched them in the United States. It's not crazy to suggest these things, but anybody who says, well, I think they're already doing it, that's somehow out of bounds. And you can't really talk about extreme weather events and needing to modify the climate to keep climate change from happening when the climate has been changing because it's been modified. This didn't start in the 90s. This started a long time. It became fully operational in the 90s. But all these extreme weather events that we're having around the world, instead of the only question is it global warming, climate change from carbon emissions, we have to at least ask to what extent this is caused by military tinkering with the climate. Only in the United States, but everywhere there are U.S. military bases. Dane Wigington's story is interesting. He is an activist in Northern California. I know him. He has been testing the soil and the groundwater for decades and finding nano aluminum metals in the soil and in the water. The only way that could get there is if it was put there and it's rained down. My experience when I went back to Eureka in 2016, I see these beautiful May mornings, not a cloud in the sky, then the airplanes would come and circle all day, zigzags, loops, boxes. You go 5 minutes in any direction, it's the same thing. Eureka, California is a town that's very rural. It's like the size of Waquillas, Ecuador, and it's outside of any commercial flight path. So that's why we know there is a military component involved. And we don't have time to get into like the flight paths, but and the jet fuel. But you shouldn't be seeing these trails that stay in the sky all day and form a sheet of white, because you never saw those in the 80s when I was growing up. And we have lots of video footage of the spraying mechanism starting and stopping. So those that claim it's just ice crystals from condensation, they don't know what they're talking about. And hopefully now with the Trump administration, we are going to get some investigation, because like Trump, he's skeptical about globalism, skeptical about international institutions, skeptical about settled science. And so he's more willing to investigate this than the outgoing Biden administration. And in fact, when we had those hurricanes last year, a senator or maybe a congresswoman, either congresswoman or senator, I think she's in the Congress, Marjorie Taylor Greene, she actually made a public statement saying that they use weather weapons, we should look at this. And Biden actually addressed it from the White House saying, look, the congresswoman from Georgia, how crazy, but there are people in Congress that are willing to talk about this increasingly. And we do have a lot of the documents related to weather modification in plain sight. Some of it's done by NASA, some of it's done by the Department of Energy. There's definitely a military component. And so we can see that they're framing the climate change narrative to accustom young people to get used to geoengineering, so that they will ask for it. And if in the future they pull back the curtain and they say, we decided to do it a long time ago, young people will clap. ¿Cómo estamos con el tiempo, Carolina Ramón?
Todavía puede continuar. Yo le aviso, todavía puede continuar. Me gustaría que hable un poquito, a ver si puede profundizar acerca de la libertad de expresión y sobre estos temas controversiales.
En español. Claro.
No, en inglés.
Sure. Well, under Trump, we have seen an increase in freedom of expression. It started with Twitter and Elon Musk, but then Mark Zuckerberg, now he's copying. Freedom of expression is contagious. And Mark Zuckerberg has said that Facebook went too far, but they really didn't have the support of the Biden administration. And so we see that, like it or not, the White House is a leader when it comes to either repressing libertad expression, repressing freedom of speech, or encouraging it. So I see weather weapons and geoengineering as very connected. It's, and the game plan is to custom the youth to accept as normal while creating hysteria over warming. We have the testimony of Scott Stevens. He was a television weatherman for 20 years, and he finally blew the whistle and said, I can't do this any longer. And this was what he said. I was a television weatherman for 20 years. These chemtrails are absolutely required to impact whatever weather event they were designing. And these trails were an absolutely necessary ingredient for them to achieve their weather modification goals. So because of this smart dust that gets put in the sky, they can then hit it with frequencies and it corresponds to high or low pressure that's heating up the sky or cooling it down. So with the chemtrails, they're able to not only bring rain when they want, like cloud seeding in Dubai, but also prevent rain, create drought, decide what parts of the world get sun. And you have a motive, because the chemical spraying started at the same time that genetically modified organisms started. And you also have this weird world of weather derivatives. These are products, stocks that commercial hedgers use, such as an insurance company or an energy company, to hedge risks that is associated with weather, like precipitation or hurricane. And so if your risk is 1 million, but you take out a 10 million hedge on the weather and then prevent the rain from happening, you can make a lot of money. So the companies in the United States are doing the weather forecasting. They're also involved in doing geoengineering, like Raytheon and Lockheed and Martin. So there's this weird world of weather derivatives, and it affects farmers in their ability to plan what they're going to be growing. And you can see tremendous and significant loss of property and crop production. And many times when these farms go out of business because they don't know if it's going to rain or not, then that's when a big agribusiness that wants to buy the farms and turn them into genetically modified farms, they can buy up cheap property. And so that there's a lot of different elements to it. There's no way to challenge the overt or direct weather manipulation, like they say they're going to start in Britain in a few days, without addressing the covert geoengineering. But that's not a conversation that's allowed in the media. And so, it's definitely something that we need to consider, especially in Latin America. I think a lot of the leaders of kind of the nationalist left-wing variety, like the president of Colombia, Petros, or Rafael Correa in Ecuador, they're skeptical of Washington, and they're skeptical of, like Daniel Noboa, he's right-wing, the current president of Ecuador. He went to Washington, D.C. to get his marching orders. But these other leaders, maybe they self-identify as socialists, but they go to Brussels, or they go to Davos, like Rafael Correa literally lives in Brussels. And there's not the same skepticism about the international institutions. And these also, it affects policy. It's like a de facto world government. And I think there should be more pushback from these international institutions. And especially with educated people who are educated in the liberal arts, we need to understand how to question our own biases and our own prejudices, and the macro narratives that we accept, like climate change. We've got to do something and sign treaties for climate treaties, or sign health treaties with World Health Organization. You have to step back and ask, is there a political agenda? And the younger generation has been so fed a narrative of carbon emissions, climate change, global warming, that now it's very hard to talk about geoengineering, because if anything, they're going to be asking for it. Okay. Con esto yo termino mis observaciones sobre la geoingeniería en inglés. No sé si ustedes tienen algunas preguntas o cosas que quieren que aclaro.
Sí, yo tengo una consulta con respecto al rol de los medios de comunicación, el rol también de la comunidad con respecto a qué información filtrar, cómo filtrarla entre este mundo tan global de tanta información. Abrimos la computadora y encontramos un centenar de información, miles de informaciones, de fuentes, unas fuentes, bueno, investigativas, otras fuentes, pues, que son solamente alarmistas, otras que se dedican exclusivamente, páginas que se dedican exclusivamente a postear información falsa. Esto para generar una especulación, para generar de alguna manera en el público interacciones, vistas, y generar un impacto negativo. También respecto a las élites políticas y económicas que están detrás de toda esta serie de fenómeno global, de no solamente las fake news, sino también de tanta problemática en cuanto a la información que hay a través de redes sociales y la información que circula. Entonces, ¿cómo podemos nosotros como comunidad filtrar esta información?
Es difícil y no hay un camino corto para reemplazar una investigación propia. Pero lo que pasa es que el concepto de fake news, noticias falsas, es interesante porque si hay noticias falsas, todos hemos visto eso con TikTok, gente que recibe sus noticias de este medio o otros medios, no es un solo problema con una red social, pero también especialmente en Europa, en Inglaterra, los Estados Unidos bajo Biden, vi que la frase fake news o noticias falsas es dado a cualquier persona que tiene una opinión que es diferente que la ortodoxia. Y esto no puede ser, porque tenemos que cuestionar nuestras macro narraciones. Y es difícil porque estamos en una guerra informática. Mucha gente han dicho que cualquier persona que cuestiona la ciencia sobre el cambio climático o calentamiento global es fake news. También han hecho esta frase discurso de odio solo por tener una opinión diferente que la ortodoxia. La diferencia en Estados Unidos es si hay acceso a una prensa alternativa. En Latinoamérica no hay acceso a una prensa alternativa, entonces, o muy poco. Entonces, muchas veces, cuando hablo de estos temas y otros, la gente va a estar escuchándolo desde la primera vez. En cambio, hemos visto en la prensa en Estados Unidos y Europa una campaña de satanizar el movimiento para liberar el cielo y tener cielos azules como seguidores de teorías de conspiraciones. Y gente parece que no tienen atención para observar lo que está pasando en el cielo y preguntar cosas básicas. Por ejemplo, ¿cómo en los 80s, poco tiempo atrás, tuvimos cielos azules y ahora no? Pero es difícil, pero el papel del periodismo independiente es muy importante, más que nunca.
Muchas gracias por la respuesta a la pregunta y bueno, vamos a ampliar en una próxima invitación un poco más el tiempo. Esta es la presentación del libro de la doctora Patricia Coso. Vamos a ampliarlo para hablarlo en español, en inglés y también, bueno, con otros ponentes si es posible. Y quiero agradecerle muchísimo por haber aceptado la invitación. Quisiera que se despida de nosotros y del público en inglés y luego en español para darle paso al siguiente ponente.
Okay, it was a pleasure. Thank you very much. Bye bye. Fue un placer. Muchas gracias. Chao, chao.
Muchas gracias. Vamos a tomar una foto y ahí darle el paso al siguiente ponente. Muchísimas gracias. Por favor, puede continuarse si lo desea. Y bueno, doctora Patricia, primero le doy paso a usted para que agradezca a Patri, quien nos ha dado este tema muy